Hello, everyone. Welcome to my presentation, Leaves of Influence, the Levertov-Williams Connection. Some of the subjects covered in this presentation include a biography and poetics of William Carlos Williams, biography and poetics of Denis Levertov, the Imagist and Modernist movements summarized, the Black poets and Levertov's organic form, the letter exchange between Levertov and Williams, poetry by Levertov and Williams with analysis, imitation poems by Michael Noah Fort, that's me, and finally, final thoughts, along with an MLA formatted biography. William Carlos Williams was born in 1883 in Rutherford, New Jersey, and came from a bicultural background where his father was English and his mother was Puerto Rican. He studied in New York City at the Horseman High School, where he became friends with Ezra Pound, one of the founders of the Imagist movement. He earned his MD in 1906 from University of Pennsylvania, and he became a doctor. Then he returned to Rutherford and became a pediatrician and got married. He became involved in the Imagist movement with his friend Ezra Pound, which greatly influenced his early poems. He then experimented and wrote in free verse, choosing not to use the traditional rhyme schemes. As William Carlos Williams matured, he continued practicing full-time medicine. He then went on to become a prolific published writer. The Red Wheelbarrow, published in 1923, became one of his most famous poems and an excellent example of Imagism and Modernism. Yet he broke from the Imagist movement, wanting to bring poetry to a distinctly American type, which reflected on the daily lives of everyday people and Americans. He later came up with ideas of the variable foot in poetics, which the Paris Review called a metrical device to resolve the conflict between form and freedom in verse. He created a line break pattern called the triadic line poetry, which is seen in his poem Asphodel, the Greeny Flower. His unique and writing style focused on the American spirits, the beauty of everyday life, and touched upon social and political themes. During the 1950s, his poetry found a newfound appreciation among poets such as Allen Ginsberg, Kenneth Rexroth, and Denis Levertov. He began a letter correspondence with Levertov beginning in 1951 until his death in 1963. Denis Levertov was born in England in 1923 to a Methodist family with a Jewish father who had converted and a Welsh mother. Educated at home by her parents, she received no formal education. She served as a nurse in London during World War II for 3 years and then immigrated to the United States in 1948 after marrying American writer Richard Goodman. She became interested in American poetry and became influenced by William Carlos Williams, who she wrote a fan letter to in 1951, starting off a lifetime of letter correspondence. She then became associated with the Black Mountain Poets, known for their experimental and projectivist poetry. She then wrote about her own approach to poetry called the organic form. She was influenced by the Vietnam War and other wars, as well as the rise of feminism, and felt that she was called to writing that advocated for peace and social justice. She also explored themes of nature, spirituality, and the human condition. She participated in anti war protests and became a voice for social change. Later in life, she taught at Stanford University and received the Lenan Literary Award as well as numerous other awards. And Imagism was a short but influential poetry movement in the early 1900s. It drew inspiration from Japanese haiku and ideogrammic writing. It was characterized by vivid and precise imagery and used concise, clear, and sensory language, free verse, and objectivity. Its origins and influences, it was founded in the early 1900s, primarily by Ezra Pound, T. Hum, and embraced by William Carlos Williams early on in his poetry. It was partially a reaction against Romanticism and Victorian poetry. Modernism in poetry represented a break from older poetic traditions. It was a movement started in the late 19th century, and its key characteristics included experimentation, free verse, a focus on image, a focus on the individual, objectivity versus subjectivity, a rejection of romanticism. And while some modernist poems used a more neutral perspective, others used their poetry as a vehicle for personal expression.
Red wheelbarrow. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens.
The Black Mountain Poets were a group of experimental poets associated with the Black Mountain College in the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s. Some of these poets included Robert Creeley, Robert Duncan, and Charles Olson. Denis Levertov's poetry was published in the Black Mountain Review, edited by Black Mountain poet Robert Creeley during the 1950s. Levertov was close with Robert Duncan as well, and they exchanged many letters, but she was not a core member. Although influenced by their style, she developed her own distinct voice, incorporating themes of feminism, social justice, nature, and spirituality. Levertov also distanced herself from being labeled as part of any movement and preferred to retain her own individuality. The poetic style of the Black Mountain Poets was characterized by an open form with a rejection of strict rhyme and meter in favor of a natural conversational style, an emphasis on individual voice and personal experience, connection to the world, and creative process and discovery. Charles Olson, the group's main leader, wrote a well-known essay in the 1950s called The Projective Verse, where he declared that poetry should be an, quote, open field to replace traditional poetic forms with an improvised form. Denis Levertov's conception of organic form was a unique form of poetics that included the following. A natural emergence of a poem's structure is from its content. It rejected predetermined forms and instead started with a convergence of emotions and observations that centered around a theme. It sought for form to crystallize through contemplation, an approach that was inspired by Gerard Manley Hopkins' concepts of inscape and in-stress. Unlike traditional free verse, organic form prioritizes the overall form rather than the individual lines. It allows for a more nuanced and impactful expression tailored to the specific experience, highlighting the importance of the creative process and discovery in shaping the poem. In the document to the right, Denise Levertov edits her statement for Donald Allen's well-known anthology, The New American Poetry, 1945 to 1960, in which she was published with the Black Mountain Poets. Here she writes, I believe poets are instruments on which the power of poetry plays, but they are also makers, craftsmen. It is given to the seer to see, but it is then his responsibility to communicate what he sees, that they who cannot see may see, since we are members of one another. Now we will look at an interview between Denise Levertov and the Paris Review.
That the work of William Carlos Williams really changed your thinking about poetry. What was it about his aesthetic that took hold? And have you, in your years writing since, do you still feel very close to Williams, or have you felt that you've grown beyond his particular influence? Or
I would never be so presumptuous as to say that I had grown beyond him, because I think he was a really major writer whose work I love, but and from whom I feel that I learned a great deal, and he was a generous and lovable person, and I came to know him personally, and all of that was tremendously valuable to me. I don't feel that his influence is I think that what I learned from him, I have sort of absorbed, and it isn't what is most apparent in my work of recent years. And I don't even know what he would think of my poems today. He liked me, and he liked my poems, and he was rather surprised that somebody from England should have sort of appeared who seemed to understand what he was talking about.
The Letters of Denise Levertov and William Carlos Williams is a collection of letters exchanged between Levertov and Williams from 1951 until Williams' passing in 1962. It was originally conceived as a book project by Levertov in 1997, just a year before her death. These letters offer a glimpse into the mutual friendship between the two poets and their joint pursuits for poetic principles, with Levertov coining the term organic form in 1965 to a letter to Williams. The collection includes 34 letters from Levertov and 42 from Williams.
Among the rain and lights, I saw the figure 5 in gold on a red fire truck, moving with weight and urgency, tense, unheeded, to gong clangs, siren howls, and wheels rumbling through the dark city.
Here's my analysis of the great figure. It's a short but powerful poem illustrating Williams' early poetic style. It's a prime example of an imagist approach using crisp images to awaken emotion and thoughtful reflection. It focuses on snapshot-like moments of a fire truck racing through a city, capturing a feeling of speed and the wonder of everyday life. Like the speeding fire truck, the poem is like a brief flash where we can only capture a glimpse. It only contains 13 lines of free verse with differing lengths, as well as only 31 lines. It uses vivid images and details and an active tense to create a sense of immediacy. Here's my imitation poem, Angel Silence. Upon the snow and ice, she drew the angel bright, in white with a brown wood stick, moving slow, not knowing of the loud crash and gunshot as her parents fought in the cold silence. Our next William Carlos Williams is This Is Just to Say. This is just to say, I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox, and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me, they were delicious, so sweet and so cold. Here is my analysis of This Is Just to Say. This is a short poem that seems simple at first glance, but is really layered with meaning. It touches on issues relating to dishonesty, temptation, and the acknowledgement of other people's needs, yet still not caring much about them. Nevertheless, it happens quickly and all within a natural, nearly common occurrence. Imagist techniques are used throughout the poem, including vivid imagery, enjambment, and objectivity. It does not speak about emotion directly, but unlike Imagist poetry, it uses a lighthearted, apologetic tone with a conversational, informal style, which Williams later gravitated toward. Here is my imitation poem. This is just to say no. We were sipping the grape that was grown from your vine, but then I knew completely drinking was forever not for me. It's too enticing, like glue, it's too sticky.
Living. The fire in leaf and grass so green, it seems each summer the last summer. The wind blowing, the leaves shivering in the sun, each day the last day. A red salamander so cold and so easy to catch, dreamily moving his delicate feet and long tail. I hold my hand open for him to go, each minute the last minute.
My analysis of Living. Living is a deep poem that uses simple words and a simple structure to discuss both the beauty of life and the inevitability of death. This is a 4-stanza poem with 3 lines for each stanza. It creates a rhythm using the structure and can possibly symbolize the 4 seasons. It uses vibrant details such as fire in leaf and grass so green. It uses personifications such as the shivering of leaves, and it repeats the word last, emphasizing the final end. This poem touches upon themes of being grateful for the present moment and with connecting with nature, all in face of the end. Here's my imitation poem of Living, Nightingale. The water in skin and veins, so clear it flows, each body the last body. The stream swirling the heart, beating in the mind, each thought the last thought. A blue nightingale, too fast and too hard to see. Quickly flies her ecstatic wings and teeny beak. She sings our tears away so we can know each breath the last breath. Here is Witness by Denise Levertov. Sometimes the mountain is hidden from me in veils of cloud. Sometimes I am hidden from the mountain in veils of inattention, apathy, fatigue. When I forget or refuse to go down to the shore a few yards up the road on a clear day to reconfirm that witnessing presence. Here's my analysis of Witness. Witness is a short but deep poem with a meaningful message. Only using 10 lines, the poem conveys the importance of remembering to actively be mindful and to seek the aspects of life that ground us. The connection between the mountain and a higher power may also be an aspect of the poem, though this is up to the reader's understanding. Nevertheless, the poem reminds us to practice being present and to recognize the moments when we are not. It only uses 10 lines within a single stanza. It utilizes free verse and short lines to evoke a sense of the present moment. It uses the steadiness and ever presence of the mountain to center the poem and serve as a possible symbol of spirituality. And here is my imitation poem, Essence. Always the sunshine is shining through us, through starbeams of dust. Always we are seeking out the starlight in all manners possible with persistence and attention. We will not lose direction, but choose to know that inside the darkness a candle burns and
Here are some of
glows
my final
to
thoughts on this
retain
presentation.
our
Levertov and Williams
sustaining
built a lifetime
essence.
connection with each other through an extensive, decades-long letter correspondence. During their exchange, both poets discussed their own visions of poetics. Though Levertov resisted being labeled and created her own unique style of poetry, she was exposed to the concepts of the Black Mountain Group and was influenced by Williams early on, who started out as an Imagist and Modernist poet. Like Williams, many of her poems offer crisp, vivid imagery and free verse. Her conception of organic form also has similarities to the ideas discussed by the Black Mountain poets. Her extensive letter correspondence with Robert Duncan, who was a member of the group, also suggests that she had a deep connection to the group's poetics. Nevertheless, Levertov went on to create her own distinctive style, which was rooted in her sense of spirituality. Levertov was also influenced by many poets, such as Rainer Maria Rilke, who she read extensively.